It never ceases to amaze me how many guys sign up for this Women in the Lecture series. It's like, But I'm going to tailor my remarks to the young women here, even though it applies to everybody. So I want to start just by telling you how wonderful you are, and I'm going to tell you why I believe that's true. First of all, I absolutely understand God's plan. And I know the value of women, and I know the value of men. And I am so grateful for my own wife and eternal companion. I know what you are going to be, and I want you to be everything that you can be. What I don't want you to do is to pigeonhole yourself and to say that you're limited to a certain role. There's a principle of truth that I hope all of you understand, and that is everybody's individual plan is individual. So don't ever compare your plan to somebody else. I was sitting on the plane next to a good friend of mine, Annette Christensen. She is a senior leader with Grant Thornton. She's over all of the Midwest region for marketing for Grant Thornton. She has a hugely visible position inside the company, and she works for the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, who is a woman. But Annette is a mother. She has 3 children. Her husband is a professional, and they're just incredibly sharp people. And as we were talking about her individual plan and how she was criticized by her sister-in-law because she has this visible position making a lot of money inside a Fortune 1000 company. And she recognized that her plan was individual. Her husband is a diabetic, a type 1. They made some decisions early on after prayerful consideration, and based upon that, they went the path that they went, and they've fasted and prayed about all the different decisions that they've done. And I can tell you that it's really created a wonderful family. I served in a stake presidency years ago, in the late 90s in Overland Park, Kansas. We invited our Stake Relief Society president, who had been the assistant DA in Walnut Creek near San Francisco for much of her career. And she thanked her husband in that stake conference for always supporting her in the direction that God had inspired her and her husband to travel. So I just wanted to get that out of the way right up front. It may have been said to you before, but I can tell you that in various homes, I have found sometimes the doctrine incorrectly taught. And we all understand the family proclamation, and I understand it as well as anybody, I'm sure. And I can tell you that it is an individual path that we take. And the Lord grants exceptions everywhere along the way, and though our primary role as mothers and fathers are to play certain roles, that they are not mutually exclusive, and I just wanted to make sure that I present that from the outset and the very beginning. Now, I have an interesting path. Okay. All right. I'm going to go through some of this really quick, this part of it. If I were talking to you at the beginning of this semester, this is what I would have told you. That you need to learn for yourselves who you are. I have students all the time that want to know, how do I know what I should do? How do I know what my own path should be, what it should be like? And we're going to talk about that. How to network, the value of networking. If you haven't already learned the value of networking with each other by going to the Women in Business, by other organizations around campus, I think that's something that's really important that you should consider doing. It's not about what you know, it's who you know. And relationships do rule the world, and you never know what kind of a relationship will bear fruit down the road. So we want to teach the correct process of starting a business. You've been reading Nail It, Then Scale It. There's a lot of great principles in that book that transcend starting a business, but that is an important book. And we're going to talk about some of those things. I'm going to tell you some of my lessons learned in starting businesses, and I have a whole boatload of business lessons learned, and all the good lessons that I've learned were never easy. Some were $100, some were $1,000, some were $10,000, some were $100,000, some were millions of dollars. There are always lessons that are being learned, and the best lessons are the tough lessons. So, and I think one of the things that is on your own back, every time you go to a sacrament meeting, you don't know whether you're going to get a boring speaker or whether you're going to get an entertaining speaker, right? You don't know whether you're going to get somebody that is going to fill you with the Spirit or somebody that's just not, you're going to have to give yourself a good talk. As Elder Eyring once said in a training meeting in Kansas City when he was in the presiding bishopric, his father was obviously a church leader as well as an amazing scientist and in the Boston area. And after a boring talk, when his son Henry was 8 years old, he said, "Dad, how do you get through something like that?" And he said, "Well, son, I really, just started thinking about some of the spiritual thoughts that began in the morning, and I started giving myself a good talk, and I've never given myself a bad talk yet." So, if you ever get a boring speaker in here, it's not about the boring speaker, it's about the lessons learned. And that's up to you. I can tell you that learning is on your own back. And you have a decision to make about what you're going to learn today. You can learn a lot or you can learn a little, and it will be your own decision. So those are some of the things that I would have started with at the beginning of the year, but you still have some lectures, and you can reflect upon the rest of them later. This thing is not, let's see if it does that. Okay, this is me. This is my family. My wife, Marilyn, she's an amazing woman. We've been married for almost 33 years. My oldest son, Tyler, is a tax attorney. His wife, the brunette, they have 3 little children. He's the branch president in his branch in Oklahoma. Doing great things over there. They're expecting their 4th. My daughter, Brooke, to the right. Her husband is standing beside her. He's a chiropractor, and they've got 3 children. And then my daughter, Rachel, she served a mission in Seoul, Korea. She's on the left, sitting down there. And her husband, Michael, matter of fact, Michael's brother plays on the football team. They're all a bunch of great athletes, and so he's a lot of fun. And they have one son that's about 18 months old now. My son, Brandon, on the far right, he is a junior here at Brigham Young in the Industrial Design program. And his wife sitting down below him. They've got 1 child now. And then my daughter, Ashley, who's a junior here at Brigham Young, and she just got married. So I am officially an empty nester. They are my absolute greatest entrepreneurial endeavor. So why would I say that? Because I can tell you that when you first get started in any business, you have no idea what to expect. And you know that it's going to be tough. But you also know that it can have a lot of joy if you put a lot of work and effort and heart and soul into it. And I can tell you that I put a lot of heart, a lot of work, a lot of soul into my marriage. They have been my very, very first priority, always and ever. And my church callings have always been, I put as much effort into them as I did my business. The people that say that you can't have your cake and eat it too, they haven't lived my life. And it's because you can learn how to divide the fishes and the loaves and create miracles even when it's not apparent how you're going to do that. So in my early career, I actually started out in sales management for a company called Kernite, a Fortune 1000 company. Not a very sexy company, but in 5 or 6 months, I was the top salesperson inside the organization, and they moved me to Kansas City, Missouri, where we lived for 21 years. That got us out there, but I eventually, in the middle 80s, was named the national sales manager and then later VP and general manager of an orthopedic company. And then in 1988, I actually started my own business. So some people ask, well, how does your career get started? How does somebody just all of a sudden become Josh James or anybody else that's a successful entrepreneur? And it all starts at the very beginning. Because everyone has an individual path. So when you think about your own individual path, you ought to look at your patriarchal blessing. You ought to study that because it was meant to be a roadmap. And then you get busy and you go to work. Remember, Nephi said, I, Nephi, not knowing beforehand the things that I should do, nevertheless I went forth. So he got busy. He got going. He just didn't sit still. He did something. He didn't know what it was, but he did something. He did the best thing that he could. He did everything that he knew to do. In other words, he took all of his options going through the problem-solving model and said, these are the options that are available. These are my gifts and talents. I can make a decision based on all the information sitting in front of me. And I want to admonish you girls not to make decisions. Don't be afraid to make decisions. So I was on the, and the same goes for you young men. You guys got to figure things out, actually, you know, this making decisions business. So a couple nights ago, I'm on the internet with my wife, and we're booking tickets to Europe. We're going to spend 2 weeks in Europe in May. So, you know, tickets in Europe are kind of expensive, and we're looking at, we get our itinerary all set, we've got our friends, we're all set, and then she says, but I haven't had a chance to talk to them yet, and I'm not sure. I said, you know, prices can change. This is the perfect itinerary. We've got all the information. We've studied all the airlines. We're going to pull the trigger. So we pulled the trigger. She said, boy, I don't know if I'm going to sleep very well. I said, oh, you're going to be fine. The biggest mistake we can make here is $300. I think we can live with that, hon. So that's the change fee, right? So the next morning she gets up. Guess what? Tickets doubled in price. Literally doubled in price next day. Make decisions. It's important to make decisions and to learn from your decisions. Now, important decisions you have to be careful and thoughtful about, but you still have to make decisions. So my first business was life and safety products. Pretty simple product, but we made a really great business out of it. I mortgaged my home. I bootstrapped it through internal profits, and we developed a successful protected distribution model. So basically, we had occupational health and safety products such as over-the-counter meds, bandages, tapes, wraps, anything you can think of to fix an injury in the workplace, plus all the safety products, the head protection, hand protection, and all of the OSHA-type training things. We taught OSHA, we taught forklift driver safety, and we had distributors all over the country. We had 170 distributors who sold our products. We owned 10 of our own locations, and about 9 years into it, after we had scaled the company and built a very nice model, we sold the company to Cintas, the uniform people. They're the largest player in the industrial uniforms and now in the first aid and safety market in the United States. They're about $6 billion in size today, and clearly the market leader in their own space. So it's no small company. It was a great exit. So then I'm thinking, what is the next step? So I actually wrote a book. Pretty cool. You never know your life's path. So who would have guessed, you know, that a guy that didn't graduate from college, that still has 1 year left to graduate from college, would actually sit down and write this dense book. I just put it in front of a Catholic scholar, this same book, because we just completed our second book. I completed a second book with a partner. I wrote this one by myself. He actually was flabbergasted with the amount of detail that I'd gone into and the grasp, not being a PhD in the field, that he said that I had on the subject matter. Anyway, it became a great, took me 3 years, 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and it became another entrepreneurial venture. If I had known what it was going to take when I got started, I never would have done it, period. And if I would have known what it was going to take for any of the business ventures that I've done, I never would have done any of them. They have been all like birthing an elephant. All of them. And for you, if any of you women have had children, you got to know that would probably be a pretty painful proposition. Okay, so learning by faith. In the next venture, right in the middle of writing this book, just to show you how things work, in my patriarchal blessing, there was a line that said, listen to the gift of the Holy Ghost that was given you. Exercise the gift of faith that God has given you, and do the things that it tells you to do. Oftentimes, it will tell you to do those things that you don't want to do, but heed its counsel, and it will lead you in the paths of truth and righteousness. It will quicken your understanding. And I could share more, but that is sufficient. So I thought as a youth that this meant that when I was tempted, that I would know that this was a clue to reject the temptation. And certainly it was. But I never thought that I would be sitting there during the week before Christmas in 1999, talking to a couple of my friends from Ernst & Young, talking about this unique business idea that we were thinking about, knowing how risky it was, and saying, I don't know, guys, I just think that there's a lot unproven here. There has a lot of money been thrown at this solution, and I'm not sure that we're the guys to go in and actually fix the problem. And all of a sudden, I was it made known to me that I was supposed to do this. Just in a moment, it will be well. It will be tough, but it will be well. So think about how patriarchal blessings actually feed into what it is that you're about to do in mortality. So I put down $500,000 to start this business. My partners put down $50,000. We decided to not get paid for 120 days, 4 months. For me, not such a big deal. For them, that's a pretty big deal. But then the amount of money that I was putting on the table compared to what they were putting on the table, big difference. I sit down with them and I tell them, you know, I have no way of knowing what's going to happen, but based on all my other experiences, I can tell you we're in for a rough ride. So you have to be willing to hang on, and when things get tough, you know, that you're not going to bail. Are we good? We're good. Okay. So we decide to go. We incorporate on January 14th, 2000. Start the business as Planet Salvage. We bring together the supply chain of the property casualty insurance companies, the collision repair shops, and the salvage recyclers so that we can bring efficiencies for procuring salvage and alternative parts to repair vehicles for the insurance industry when vehicles are in an accident and they determine to repair them instead of deem them a total loss. Everybody get that mouthful? Okay. That's what Planet Salvage was designed to do, a SaaS software model. The old model, you can pick up the phone and call 3 or 4 salvage yards and do a phone and fax, very inefficient, very limited. Our solution, you know, you could do drop downs and you could, within 2 to 4 minutes, you would have 40 different quotes with all the information that you need to make a decision. And then, oh, by the way, side by side, here's the aftermarket part price and availability. And here's the original equipment seconds part, and here's the original equipment part. And they get to choose based on the best option, push a button, bingo, bango, bongo, the part's delivered, everything's wonderful. And not only that, but since we're integrated with the, all the estimatics platforms within the industry, then what happens is if there are 20 parts that need to be repaired, it sends out all 20 requests for quote at the same time, and they get them all back at the same time. So it really was a huge solution. But one of the things we didn't realize was that it was going to take 6 years for the whole industry to go wireless. Who would have thought that the insurance industry wouldn't buy on the product until the whole industry went wireless? I mean, that's a big deal. 6 years to go to profitability, pay for all the development, all the people. That it took us $14 million, 4 of us. It came from 4 of us because guess what? On May 20th, 2000, we're in Paris, France, my wife and I, celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. And I get a phone call from my partner that said, the other 2 Ernst & Young guys, they went in the bank account as officers. They got spooked because the market, on April 13th, 2000, the tech market dropped 318 points, and it was the beginning of the end of the internet bubble. And so we got the $8 million that we were promised by our investors, we got $1 million. And then the other 7, they called up on that day and said, you know, we're not going to be able to fulfill our commitment. You can have the $1 million free, put it on the cap table, we'll sign a release, you sign a release, but we're not going to be able to give you the other 7. Sort of a bad day in an entrepreneur since we'd already spent the $1 million already. Now we have very little run rate left. So imagine that you come, you know, that they go in, they take their initial investment out, and they take the money that they would have been paid if we had agreed that they would have been paid for those 4 months, and they basically empty the bank account. Leave a little bit of money left in the bank. An opportunity for incredible leadership. when you think about that moment in time, think of your favorite movie, you know, like Apollo 13. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Remember that in the movie? Anybody, raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. And so it's a big deal. You know, you just can't sit back and say, well, what do we do next? You know, if the trump sends an uncertain sound, who will prepare for battle, right? That's what the scriptures say in 1 Corinthians 15. So basically, I had a speech that I came back and gave to the team. And I said, people, you know, bad things happen. And I knew that bad things would happen. But you know what? I'm committed to this project, and we're going to make this happen. So stick with me. We're going to get there. Things will be fine. You're going to get your paychecks. And you know what? All 9 of those people that were there that day were there at the day of harvest. It's a pretty cool deal, actually. 12 years later. We just sold the company last year to a major industry player. A long time in coming. So, APU Solutions. Boards. You know, one of the best things that I did, I think, at APU Solutions was early on, immediately after having that problem, was I began to contact a lot of my good friends. And through them, that's where I learned that it's not what you know, but who you know. So I know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. And basically, my board members consisted of John Leach, who was the former chairman and CEO of Western Auto when it was doing $2 billion back in 1989. Tom Gigax, who sold his company Tire Plus, his take was almost $200 million. And Larry Maddox, who was considered the father of venture capital back in Kansas City. That's kind of a cool board to have, don't you think? And that was really helpful in guiding the company through all the ups and downs and pitfalls, because I had a very experienced team. And one of the lessons that I really learned here was something that you learned from Winston Churchill's commencement speech at, I think it was Oxford or Cambridge. I can't remember which one. Do you remember the speech? Anybody remember it? He's giving the keynote address. He stands up the podium. He puts his hand on the lectern, looks out in front of the audience, gazes, you know, looks into the, and he says, never, never, never give up. And then he turns around and he sits down. Imagine that. So the president of the university, chancellor, whatever he was called, he stands up, then he turns back, and he says, Dr. Churchill, do you have anything else to say? These people came to hear something. He didn't say that part. He comes back up to the lectern, he puts his hands there, and he looks again longer across the whole thing, and he says, never, never, never give up. You know what? I learned that lesson for myself on every business that I've ever done. The only reason any of my businesses ever succeeded is because, like Nephi, not knowing beforehand what I should do, I just put one foot in front of the other until it eventually worked. And things do work out if you keep on keeping on and you keep on learning. So we sold, as I said, we sold that company to a large industry player, Autotex, who is part of the Solera network. It's a multi-billion nationally or publicly traded company. And then best final, what brought me back to Utah was in the middle, I go back to writing my book. And so I spend 1.5 years writing my book, 14-hour days, 6 days a week. Marilyn sees me working harder on this book than I've worked in my businesses, up late at night. And then out of the blue, I get a phone call from a friend of mine who had lived in my stake and had moved back to Utah and said, Scott, we've got a partner that we want to buy out, and we're not sure how to buy him out. Can you help us? And so I'm sitting there at my computer, and guess what happened? What do you think? It's okay. Go ahead. Shout it out. Yeah, that voice again. You're supposed to do this, Scott. I said out loud with nobody sitting in the room, I have no interest in doing this. Why? We have a bazillion friends back in Kansas City. Why in the world would I want to move back to the fishbowl? No offense. And In addition, I'm only 4.5 years into our term as a stake presidency and really having a great time. And my kids are well entrenched in the schools and they're loving life. And my daughter, by the way, is a junior in high school and going to be the valedictorian of her high school class. And so there's all these different things, and I bring these things up, and you're supposed to do this. And after going to the temple, and then after having the kids all fast and pray, they all came up with exactly the same answer. We're supposed to do this. And so I had just finished my book, because I spent the first 1.5 years, then I spent 2 years running the business, then I realized that we had another 3 or 4 years. We didn't know how long it was going to take for the whole industry to go wireless, but we knew it was going to be 2, 3, 4 years. So I went to the board and said, guys, it doesn't make sense for me to keep putting in money and taking no money in, because I went for 2 years without making any money in the new venture. I was an unpaid CEO. Pretty good. But not just that, I was giving the company money, to make it go, right? So I said, I think it makes sense for me to go do something else. And so I used that time and I finished the book. And as soon as I finished the book, December 2002, I get this phone call. You can see how things are orchestrated if you are trying to follow the gleam as much as you can. Again, one of those companies that not that sexy, so to speak. But you know what? We started, and the company had about $1 million in sales. I bought 50% of the company. In 4 years, we built the company to $35 million. We were twice the largest company in the nation in our space. And we were bought by a private equity group in 2007. And let me tell you what I learned most about this business that I think will be helpful to you. So I go inside of the business, and it's an operating business already, but it has some problems. I've got good partners. They're good people. They're talented. It's the first business that they've run. And one of the things that they did was they commingled their expenses. They had 2 companies, and they operated it as one. So I couldn't tell how profitable one was versus the other. Well, how are you going to make any decisions in business if you don't even know the profitability? You don't know anything. You don't have the information. It's like flying an airplane without the gauges on the dashboard. How do you fly an airplane without those? You're going to be in the ground. So the first thing I did was we stripped out all those expenses. Guess how long it took our accountant to do that? About 5 or 6 months. Oh, and then guess what? I found out that the company hadn't made money. It had actually lost $200,000 the last year when I thought that it had made money. Well, that's huge. I don't think I would have paid as much for it. Actually, I didn't overpay, really, at the end of the day, but I still would have paid less. So then also, the bad news is that not only had it lost $200,000 last year, but in the first 6 months, it had lost another $150,000. Now, how are you sleeping? You doing okay? I'm not. I'm not. After about age 40, sometimes you can't go all the way through the night without having to sometimes take a trip. Well, guess what? Every time that would happen, I could never go back to sleep. I had so much on my mind. For 6 months, it was like that. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but I had a Relief Society president that took $100,000 that year out of my pocket. At the same time that I was putting money into the company, she was taking money out of the company. Now, how do you think I'm feeling about things? Well, it was okay. Even with that difficulty, we still turned the company around, and we made $100,000 the first year, and then we made several hundred, $600,000, $700,000 the next. And the third year, we actually made about $2 million in the third year. So we were off and going. But how did that happen? The very first thing that I did was I re-engineered the entire company. I took a look and said, what happens when the phone rings? All the way until the check clears the bank and the fence is paid for. And then what happens in between? And I boiled it down to 38 steps after interviewing all the employees of the company. And then I went department by department by department. And inside of each department, we developed an operating manual that showed everybody's role in that step process. And we institutionalized our approach to putting in fences. And we developed a sales monster. Basically what we did is we created a presentation that showed all of our strengths of our product, of our process, of our customer service, of our guarantees, our warranties, everything that had to do with what the customer would be interested in. And, you know, the company turned on a dime. Good people. It takes good people, and I had good partners. And everyone contributed to the process. But that was an important lesson that I learned about institutionalizing and being process-oriented and liken it to like a basketball team, you know, a basketball player. So a good basketball player, they've got a nice soft shot, right? Okay, watch Gonzaga take down St. Mary's last night. And they've got to be able to shoot free throws. They've got to be able to pass the ball. They've got to be able to play defense. They've got to be able to rebound. And they have to be in fantastic athletic condition, right? So I can isolate each and every one of those, right? Like my son, when he was 5 years old, and I hired a college basketball player to put him through dribbling drills. So you can take everything, you can practice it in isolation. Same with business. You've got finance, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got operations, you've got legal, you've got research, you've got all kinds of stuff, but you can break them all down and then you manage them individually. You don't try to look at the whole thing as this big massive monster. You put people in charge that know what they're doing. Teams are built, companies are built based on A players. That means that you guys need to be A players. Because you know what? If I'm the guy that's hiring, I only hire A or potential A players. And I have interviewed tens of thousands of people, literally, I'm not kidding, over the years. I have done a lot of interviewing. So much that at the end of the day, my voice wouldn't work. So I can tell you that you can become an A player, and you need to be an A player. And it all starts with attitude. The city of happiness is located in the state of mind. I hope you never forget that statement. The city of happiness is located in the state of mind. It doesn't matter what happens to you. You're in charge of the response. You can't control the stimulus all the time, but you can control the response. And you're accountable and responsible for controlling the response, no matter how bad it is. The loss of a loved one. I can remember this guy that was, I have a friend that is in the insurance industry, and dang, this time goes by so fast. He's in the insurance industry, and so he went to the top of the table and heard this guy that was successful, multi-gazillionaire, and he was talking about how laughter is great, you know, and so I heard this thing, and our whole family was laughing because we played it on a vacation, you know. Hey, honey, we're about to go bankrupt. Ha ha! You know, they're just, we're going to get a divorce. You know, it's the craziest thing. Everybody's laughing like crazy. So there is something to having a good sense of humor. Well, that was best final. I can see that you're not going to get the whole thing here today, but the bottom line is that we were able to sell to a private equity group and have a nice exit, which led me to doing the same thing here at Benefit Communication Insourcing. Whoops. Let's see if I can take that back. I was there for 2 years, from 2009 to 2010, and I prepared the company for scaling. So basically, I inserted all the systems and the processes that would be necessary so that we could begin an aggressive marketing and sales campaign that would allow us to grow at whatever speed we were capable of selling, and that it wouldn't kill us. You know, we wouldn't provide bad service. We wouldn't fall all over ourselves. We wouldn't spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands needlessly. So that was the intent. We got it ready to scale. I then brought in a COO, a Bain executive, and that's when BYU came calling and said, hey, would you think about running an entrepreneurship program? in the middle of all this, about the same time I started with BYU, some BYU technology. This company was about ready to go under. It was 2 weeks away from bankruptcy. Great technology, 1,000 years, great for archival. That's its space. And so while people aren't using optical technology as much as they used to, and drives are starting to come, without sometimes, or the computers are starting to come without drives, everything's gone to the cloud. Well, not so, because the archive space is still alive and well, and billions of dollars. And, using Moore's Law, the doubling of information, it's a great business, but they didn't have a great management team. And they blew through $15 million in 2 years. They paid themselves outrageous salaries. And they didn't start the company on the lean startup principles that you're reading about in Nail It, Then Scale It. And as a result of it, they blew through $15 million of shareholder value. I want you to think about that for just a moment. I had a friend of mine, that described it this way. The average American makes $50,000 a year. How easily should anyone invest $50,000 or a year's worth of their labor, of a person's labor, to some unproven idea, harebrained idea? Really? Really? I don't think so. So if you use the lean approach that Dr. Furr talks about in Nail It, Then Scale It, then that gives you the opportunity of not making some of the mistakes that I made in one of my ventures, at least. At any rate, I first became a stockholder. Then we did the turnaround, and now we've got the company on the growth stage. It's doing very well. We have contracts with all these multinational players: LG, Dell, Acer, Philips. The list goes on, actually. And we're doing very well. So anyway, then the Rawlins Center comes along, and do you realize, I don't know if you realize this, but for the last 3 years in a row now, implementing some actually incredibly wonderful programs here at the center, we have been, in the Princeton Review, a top 5 program in the entire country. So you're here at a university that really gets on entrepreneurship, that has a ton of programs for entrepreneurship, and we're here to help. And that's the bottom line, is we're here to help. That's the only reason why I'm here. They certainly don't pay me very much money, and I actually walked away from a $400,000 a year paying job to be here at Brigham Young University with one thing in mind, and that's giving back. Because you know what? At the end of the day, you're worth it. Because of the rising generation. You read about the scriptures, you read in the scriptures about the rising generation, and you recognize the critical role that you guys play. Don't underestimate it. You guys are capable of so much more than you yet think about yourselves. Don't waste your talent. You have so many opportunities, and you guys need to take those opportunities and run with them. So we built it around curriculum, events, competitions, and mentoring, and so forth. I'm going to close with one thought, and that's about all we're going to get into. But I think that you've had plenty of lessons learned that have been passed along today that you can hang your hat on. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Now, this was written about, I don't know, 3,000 years ago. It's a proverb, so about 3,000 years ago, a long time ago. No technology, no computers, no neuroscience. Well, guess what? We have a lot of science today. So, ever heard of this author, Napoleon Hill, author of Think and Grow Rich? It's actually a great book. It was one of Howard W. Hunter's favorite books. You have to be careful when you read it because, again, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So if you think about money and that's all you think about, that may be all you get. And you should think about so much more. Well, this is something I wrote in my book when I was contemplating why the scriptures could say that it's okay, for us not to participate in certain lifestyles that seem natural to some but not to others. And it has to do with this, with our thinking. Even the adult brain is plastic, able to forge new connections among its neurons and thus rewire itself. Sensory input can change the brain. And the brain remodels itself in response to behavioral demands. I hope you guys get that. The existence and importance of brain plasticity are no longer in doubt. The brain is dynamic, and the life we lead leaves its marks in the complex circuitry of the brain, footprints of the experiences we've had, the thoughts we've thought, the actions that we've taken. The brain allocates neural real estate depending on what we use most, the thumb of the video game addict, the index finger of a braille reader, the analytic ability of a chess player, the language skills of a linguist. Or frankly, if we think about pornography, I guarantee you, same. But the brain rewires itself something much more ephemeral than what we do. It rewires itself based on what we think. So I would encourage you to think positive thoughts and good thoughts, and to remember that truly what we think is important. Let's see. I'm going to not go through this stuff. You know, I'm not going to go through any of it. I'm going to tell you one last thing. I've got about 4 minutes. So in looking at this study, it was called the Duhigg Study, Charles Duhigg. He was a marketing guy for Target, and he was an expert in marketing. Okay, obviously, you would expect. He showed in his study some of the results from MIT, where individuals, where they did this study on rats. And on the rats, they hooked neurosensors up to them, and they put them in a maze, and they put chocolate at the end, and then they let them at it. And of course, at first, as they're going through this maze, they are furiously, the brain activity is like off the charts, going crazy, okay? And so they finally get to the end, they nibble, blah, 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 and they keep doing it, they get better, they keep doing it, they get better, they get better, and pretty soon it's do not pass go, do not collect $200, you know, just go directly to jail, you know, the whole Monopoly thing, and they go straight to the chocolate. Well, then something happened that was unexpected. As they did the neural readings, they found that the brain actually was no longer really working. It was by rote now. And so the lesson learned there is that be careful what you think and the habits that you form, because you're not thinking about them and you are developing by rote. And when you think about your careers and the possibilities and the opportunities that are ahead of you, be careful about what you think. And I would counsel you to read out of the best books. I have a big library. I have a ton of business books. And I have a ton of books on early Christianity. I have probably a couple thousand books in my library. And I don't just read, by the way. You know, I love to golf and run and lift and all kinds of other things, you know, and I do all of them. But I can tell you that knowledge is important, and it will guide you in the things that you do. The last thing just to leave you with is to challenge yourselves. I want to leave you a challenge to become the best that you can be. Don't settle for anything less than that. If God was able to say to you, you're going to go to earth to get an experience, and that experience is designed to teach you to become like me, if he could say that, then is it difficult for us to say, let's get off of our backsides, get out of our chairs, and let's be up and doing, and let's have as many BHAGs. Anybody know what a BHAG is? Big, hairy, audacious goals. You know, I mean, go big or go home, all right? Set your sights high and shoot for the stars, and then work like crazy to make your dreams happen. Thanks for listening. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be with you today.